Welcome to the Avoidance of Foreclosure and Eviction section of the Dodd-Frank Prep course brought to you by NHNLA. Section 6.3, FHA Mortgage Default Assistance. The FHA, which is Federal Housing Administration's purpose, is to expand homeownership and rental housing opportunities for people not adequately served by the private mortgage market. There are informal and formal forbearance plans that FHA utilizes. The informal forbearance plans are oral agreements. So basically over the phone agreement that for 3 months or less they will either waive the payments or reduce it. The formal forbearance plans are in writing and last from 3 to 6 months. Now a special forbearance, and by the way, if you're following along in the book, this is right at page 2. Page 2. There's informal, we're already there. Special forbearance, a written agreement between a servicer and an unemployed borrower allowing partial payments while looking for a job. So the unemployed borrower must be at least 3 payments past due, but not more than 12. And when I say payments, they're looking at principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. There's a loan modification option that FHA will offer as part of their default assistance. And a FHA loan mod may include a change in the interest rate, a capitalization of delinquent principal, interest, and escrow. Remember, we're not worried about capitalization now because we talked about it already. So that's basically taking the arrears or the past due amount and adding it to the principal balance. They'll also utilize an extension of the mortgage term and or a reamortization of the balance due. So they may extend the term only, or they may just reamortize, after they've capitalized the arrears. No principal reductions are allowed on FHA. Let me repeat that one more time. No principal reductions are allowed on FHA. There's also an FHA HAMP. And the FHA HAMP typically involves the combination of the loan mod and the partial claim. Now the partial claim may include an amount needed to cover the arrears in the loan payments and potentially an additional amount of principal deferment. Now I know what you're thinking. You're like, well, wait a minute. You said no principal reductions allowed. That is true, but FHA may allow a principal deferment. This partial claim doesn't just go away. It's like a second mortgage. So that principal part that they're not paying on right now because it's deferred, that's still owed on the property. With FHA HAMP, a mortgagee may use the HAMP standalone partial claim without a loan mod, but only if the following 3 conditions are met. The mortgager's current interest rate is at or below market, and this is on page 4 if you're following along. The mortgager's current mortgage payment is at or below the target monthly payment, and as we know, the target monthly payment is 31% of their income. The mortgager otherwise qualifies for FHA HAMP as described in the next slide, and we'll talk about this right now. So, FHA partial claim. The maximum value of all outstanding partial claims for a given loan cannot exceed 30% of the outstanding unpaid principal balance as of the date of default. So as an example, if the borrower has a mortgage for $90,000, the partial claim cannot be more than $30,000 exactly. And to calculate the maximum partial claim amount available under FHA HAMP, first we have to do this. We have to calculate the sum of the arrearages. We have to add in legal fees and foreclosure costs related to canceling the foreclosure. And then we have to add in the principal deferment. Once we add all of that together, it cannot be more than 30% of the outstanding unpaid loan balance. FHA HAMP standalone loan mod is also allowed without a partial claim if these 2 qualifications are satisfied. An affordable mortgage payment can be achieved by reamortizing the mortgage for 360 months at or below the market rate. And the mortgager qualifies for HAMP. Now when we say market rate, what are we talking about? What we're talking about is no more than 50 basis points greater than the most recent Freddie Mac weekly primary mortgage market survey rate. Now that's a mouthful, isn't it? Absolutely. And that needs to be rounded. That can be rounded to the nearest 1/8 of 1%. Now, you don't need to know all that. What you need to know is where to go to look this up. And actually, for purposes of the Dodd-Frank certification, just 50 basis points or 0.5% over the Freddie Mac weekly primary mortgage market survey rate. And this website that you see here, www.freddieMac.com/PMMS/ which stands for, in case you forget it, Primary Mortgage Market Survey, that'll take you to what it is today as of the date, or as of the date of the default. You can look up the history, etc., and find that information. So not too difficult. And this is what it looks like. It'll show you 30-year, 15-year. I think there's a few others that are on there, but this gives you an idea of what it looks like. Now, FHA home retention waterfall. That is going to be on page 7, and let's look at it together. First, we start with the initial assistance screens, and you're going to actually just fill that out as you're looking at the waterfall, and it kind of gives you in order. So the first thing we're going to look at is household or mortgager have they experienced a verifiable loss, income loss, or increase in living expenses. So that has to be verified. If the answer is yes, we go on to step 2. One or more mortgagers are currently employed. If the answer is yes, we go on to step 3. And the nice thing about the way this is laid out is you see if the answer is no, then you know your option really is an informal or formal forbearance and a repayment. But if you've gotten all the way to step 2, then your option may be a special forbearance. But let's say you said yes to step 2, so we go to step 3. Surplus income is at least the greater of $300 or greater than 15% of the net income. If the answer is no, then we're going to look at FHA HAMP and skip to step 6. If the answer is yes, then we're going to go on to step 4. Step 4 says 85% of surplus income is sufficient to cure the arrears within 6 months. Then if the answer is yes, then we look at a formal forbearance, which is basically repayment for 3 to 6 months. If the answer is no, then we may need a loan modification. Step 5, which is step 5. Step 5 says modification will reduce monthly payment by at least the greater of 10% or $100. If the answer is less, the modified interest rate must not exceed 50 basis points, like we just said, over the Freddie Mac average, rounded to the nearest 1/8 at the time the trial payment plan is offered to the mortgager. The term of the modified loan must be 30 years on FHA. But if the answer is no, meaning the modification would not reduce the monthly payment to at least the greater of 10% or $100, then we look at FHA HAMP here, and we skip down to step 6. And then we see this requires successful completion of a trial plan, and it's got all the different options here. Use of FHA HAMP is to both alleviate the burden of immediate payment of arrears and to adjust the monthly payments. And then it talks about the partial claim, which we've talked about, the modification, which we've talked about, calculating allowable principal deferment amounts. And let's actually go into it just a little bit. So the first thing they're going to do is, because FHA prevents combining a partial claim and a loan mod, they're going to look at partial claim. Total amount available is the lesser of, like I said, 30% of the outstanding balance or any previous claim amounts on the mortgage, and the sum of the arrearages, legal fees, foreclosure costs, principal deferment. So whichever the lesser is. The modification, they're going to calculate the monthly payment, and they're basing it off the homeowner's gross income at 31%. Calculate 80% of the current mortgage payment. Calculate 25% of the gross income. Take the greater of the 80% and the 25%, and then take the lesser of the 31% and the greater of B and C. And if you're following along, you can see what I'm doing here. And then they're going to calculate the monthly payment on the current loan balance at the market rate and 360 months on the term. If the result of step 2 is lower than the result from step 1, then the mortgager is eligible for a standard modification at market interest rate, and if necessary, a partial claim for arrearages, legal fees, and foreclosure costs, but may not receive a principal deferment. So we would go then to step 4, which is calculate allowable principal deferment, and it breaks it down on how you would do that. So if you reduce the loan balance used in step 2 until the calculated mortgage payment reaches the target amount from step 1, or else the maximum allowable principal deferment is reached per the amount available as calculated above under the partial claim. So basically, in a nutshell, and let's think about it that way, in a nutshell, your lender is going to do all this for you, but you just need to know that you're going to look at, first they have to have verifiable income loss or verifiable increase in living expenses. They need to be currently employed. They need to have, well, if they have a surplus of income of greater than $300 or greater than 15% of their net income, then they can look at possibly a forbearance or repayment plan. If they don't, we need to get that payment down. And in getting that payment down, that's when we look at HAMP. We're looking at a loan modification because they don't make enough money to cover the payment. So I hope that makes sense. All right, next page. An important note on steps 5 and 6, which is the modification and the HAMP. The modification must reduce the mortgage payment by 10% or $100, whichever is greater. So just want to make sure you understand that. It seems like it's, I know when we talk through it, it seems like, oh my God, it's a lot. But A, the lender is going to run through HAMP anyway. But again, you still should know what they're looking at and what numbers are affecting these calculations. So make sure you earmark page 7 in case you have an FHA HAMP, and you want to make sure, because sometimes, you know, lenders are people too, they make mistakes. So you want to make sure you understand how that process works in case you have to advocate on behalf of your client. Thank you.